go ahead and get started with our Madison County Board of Education work session. Mr. Perkins.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you for your grace, your loving kindness, and your mercy, for the opportunity of serving this district, serving our community, serving our kids, our teachers, our faculty and staff members. We ask, O Lord, that you would be in the midst of us, that you would lead, guide, and direct our conversations, direct our actions, and the things that we put in place for our students. We ask that you'll be with us now, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, informational items, instructional updates.
Good evening. Appreciate y'all giving us a few minutes tonight to share what we're wanting to talk with you about tonight are a lot of our data points from this past year. Just obviously I feel like it's very important that as a board and working with the superintendent and our district staff that you have a good understanding of where our students are in the accountability areas, and so we'll be talking a lot about that data tonight. I've asked our instructional supervisors to come and they'll be sharing from their respective areas. So Haley James will be talking with you about our elementary data, Tracy Ray about our middle school data, Jennifer Fanning about our high school data, and Carrie Bass will be discussing our federal programs, our Title I, our EL data from those federal programs. But before we get to that, just a few things I wanted to share with you, some celebrations. First of all, I'm sure you probably have seen this by now, but November is Think Alabama Teachers Month, and we always like to remember those that are in our classrooms that are doing the difficult and challenging and oftentimes fun and sometimes thankless and all of that work, but this is a great opportunity for us to remember them and reach out to them and let them know that what they mean to our district. I put a couple of recent tweets up there. Amber Kimbrell from Sparkman High School and Beth Marshall from Buckhorn both were awarded some pretty significant state awards, and that's not unusual for teachers from Madison County, that they're recognized both at the state and regional and national level for their expertise. And obviously some of you were able to attend, and I'm sure obviously you've been there in the past, the Excel Awards. It was nice that happened during the month of November as we thank our Alabama teachers that we're recognizing the best of the best in each one of our schools. So just a good time to do that. So that's a celebration. Recently, you may have seen in the local news outlets or whatnot the NAEP results. That's the nation's report card. That's something that a lot of our politicians and stuff try to, they make a lot of our educational decisions based on the outcomes of that national test. It's given on alternating years to grades 4 and 8. But Alabama has a lot to celebrate here. We've gotten beaten up a good bit, some internally, some externally, because our NAEP results have not been very good. Through the pandemic, who knew what the results of that was going to be? But recently, Harvard University, following the most recent NAEP results, Harvard University did an extensive analysis of both state data and NAEP data, and have come to the conclusion that not only did Alabama weather the pandemic better than most, but really led the way. And it's a shining moment for our state's education system that we're a place that other districts look to, like, how did y'all manage it? What did you do? Why did your data not only did we not drop in certain areas, we increased achievement during that pandemic time, but or certainly stayed the same during that pandemic. It's definitely something for us to be proud of. And to let those who make decisions, don't let them forget that we're doing great things in public education in Alabama, as part of this research study at Harvard, they created a statistical analysis where they looked at individual districts and was proud that in both reading and math that Madison County sustained well through the pandemic, and that was, that wasn't by happenstance. That wasn't just luck that happened. That was some purposeful planning. That was a lot of support from both the district leadership, the board, but primarily the fact that we had teachers and administrators that were in the classroom doing difficult work during a very difficult time to the best of their ability, and it has paid off. Our kids are going to be in a much better place moving forward than children academically are going to be in many of the other states in this country. So it is something that we do not need to lose sight of, that both in our district and throughout our state, that's been a big deal. And it's something that I'm very, very proud of. Some other things that I'm proud of. So ACAP is our new state accountability assessment. We just had our second administration of it. And some things that I always like to point out to the board is, what's our return on investment? If you look at the chart there in grades 3 through 8, there's 138 school districts in the state of Alabama. Most of those now, the majority of those now, are smaller city school systems. Can be very focused and very intentional in alignment of their curriculum and their resources and everything, K through 8. In our larger districts, in our 67 counties and some of our larger city districts, it's a little more challenging to do that. But in spite of those challenges, we do that. In Madison County, you can see that when we look at our combined grades 3 through 8, we look at ELA, math, and science, our system scores in the top 20 school districts in the state of Alabama. That's the top 14% of the school systems in the state of Alabama. And then you see that other side. And this is the part where we're thankful that we have Karen O'Bannon here. We're thankful that we've got a superintendent, a board, district leadership, all those kind of people that make good decisions with our money, because we still, when we rank our funding versus other places, we're in the bottom 27%. I think most businesses and industry would be very tickled if they were spending a little bit of money to get the kind of results that we get in Madison County. So again, we can say that in here, and we can keep that message in here, or we can go tell the world that we're doing great things in Madison County. And it is not from, again, it's not luck. That doesn't happen because we're just fortunate to live where we live. It happens because we've got great teachers showing up, being dedicated, building relationships with kids, working hard to give a lesson every day. We've got administrators running our schools at a very high level. We're involved in doing the right work. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. And when you put all that stuff together and you get support behind it, some really good things can happen. Now, we see that out of those rankings, math and science, a little bit behind ELA, okay? That's not to be, that's not a shock. Across the nation, we know the pandemic had a disproportionate impact, negative impact, on math achievement during that time. So, but it did not have as great of an effect, both in Madison County and throughout our state, as it did in a lot of other places. Now, this is difficult to see. You may have to kind of look at it. It's really, you can see the bars, and I think that's the main thing. But this is just another thing that I think we have to be mindful of. I think it's an area of pride for our school district. And this is a message that we need to be telling people. But this shows the growth, this shows the achievement both in 2021 and 2022 in ELA for all of our subpopulations. So it looks at gender, race, ethnicity, and then our subgroups like special education, our economically disadvantaged students. And in ELA, we grew in every single subpopulation, every single one of them, with the exception of our homeless population, and they had an even, they didn't lose ground from 21 to 22. In mathematics, you'll see some pretty significant gains. Every single subgroup grew from 2021 to 2022. Every single subgroup grew during that time. That says several things. The first thing that I think it's really important for us to be mindful of, I think this speaks to our equity work in our district, okay? It speaks to how mindsets that we're changing. I think it speaks to how we spend our money. Some of these subgroups, they have funding, and we'll talk some more about that tonight. They have funding that is used to support maybe some specific needs that they have. And I think we do a good job with that in being very intentional and being very purposeful in how we use those funds. So I'm excited to see the growth that we've made in both ELA and mathematics in all of our subpopulations. Now, our expectations. I think that data shows a couple of things. I think it showed that we've made a commitment to equity within our district, but we've also made a strong commitment to staying the course, okay? That we have a plan of what we're trying to get accomplished, and we work that plan every single day, and that plan starts with our pillars of excellence, our mission statement, our pillars, the 3 C's. Those things mean something, and we implement those every day. We've had a strategic plan for 5 years, and you know, I was really proud that when this plan was built, played a role in that. It was really exciting that both our superintendent and our school board, I felt like, really had input into this along with our communities. They bought into it, and we've worked the plan for 5 years, and we worked it during a pandemic. And it was working this plan that helped us stay the course when the world had kind of gone to heck in a handbag a little bit. But we worked the plan. It helped us stay focused, and the data that you're about to see is a positive result of doing this. Now it's time for a new plan, okay? This plan has been worked, okay? We've got a new board coming into place, new superintendent coming into place. Our district desperately needs those individuals, needs our communities to re-engage. Where does our district go in the next 5 years, okay? And I think that will provide the kind of guiding light that our district needs, our teachers, our support staff, our principals, everybody needs to maintain and to continue to grow like we've done the last 5 years. We also look at the Whole Child Initiative. That's been a passion of Mr. Perkins, and certainly has been something that we've all embraced as a district, but making sure that we create safe, healthy, engaged, supported, and challenged cultures for our students in our building. But we take all that and we built an instructional framework. And these are the things as a district that, you know, this has always been the mindset in Madison County. This isn't anything new. We're lean in our district at the district level. Our supports go into our schools, and I'll show you some data on that in just a minute. But, you know, because we don't have we're not top heavy, we don't have a lot of people here, so we've got to be very focused in the things that we support our schools in doing. And that's where we came up with this framework, and this is what we've been working for 5 years now, in getting better in each of these areas. And I think because we focused on a few things and gotten better at them, it's led to better data. So in my part here, just a couple of quick things, our current reality. These are some things that as a board and building a new strategic plan and thinking about what we need to do as a district moving forward, these are some things you need to be cognizant of. And the first of this, I shared this data about a month or so ago with our leadership and our principals, and, you know, but in our district, we have a significant percentage of our staff is non-tenured. Now, that does not mean that they're not experienced, okay? We're fortunate in Madison County that we're able to hire teachers from other districts that have good experience, and so, you know, we're able to cherry pick some of that. But we also have, but what this data says to me is we've got a significant number of people in our system that maybe don't know what Madison County is all about. What are the expectations here in our district, okay? And I did this in two ways. I looked at just our non-tenured staff. So this is our faculty. This could be assistant principals, counselors, librarian, teachers. This is all of them. But then I thought it's really important to look at who's the core teachers. Who are those people that are delivering instruction every day? In our elementary schools, almost 40% of our teachers haven't been in our district more than 3 years. I mean, that needs to sink in just a little bit, okay? That's pretty significant, all right? Now, why is that? Well, we had some people leave due to the pandemic, okay? This past year, or using our ESSER funds and using some stabilization money and using some Title II money, we added almost 50 units. So we added almost 50 people to our teaching staff this year that wasn't there before. With our ESSER money, we've added math coaches to our elementary schools. We've added instructional coaches to our secondary schools. Many of those individuals, they came from our classrooms, so we replaced them with non-tenured people, okay? But I think this does two things. I think this positions us well for the future when that ESSER money goes away, but it also lets us know that we've got to continuously train and support our staff. And we've worked hard to try to do that, and I think, I think the data shows that in spite of having a large percentage of teachers that are not haven't been here a significant amount of time, we've worked hard to try to make sure they're trained to do their job well. I'd also think it speaks well that our principals work hard to hire good people, and when they select those. I think you need to be cognizant of what our demographic data is. It's changed. A student in Madison County from 6 years ago, it's changed, all right? And sometimes we get a fixed mindset and we think that, okay, same group of kids it's always been. Y'all know our enrollment's increasing. That's not a surprise. But just looking at some of our larger subpopulations in our district and seeing what's happening to the percentages of those, as one of our staff pointed out, and it's a significant note, as that enrollment increases, you all are intelligent people. 2.5% of 19,600 is more than 2.5% of 18,700. So, minor changes in percentages for a larger body of students means a lot more kids that are in some subpopulations there, okay? But it's just something as a board making decisions moving forward that you understand what a student in Madison County looks like. This is the last thing I wanted to share with you. Put this chart together the other day just as a reminder of where our kids are in relation to the pandemic, okay? So the yellow line is where our students are this year, grades 2 through 12. Walk that back 3 years to where we left early, the last 9 weeks of the school year. We did a digital backpack. We tried to do some makeshift stuff in a couple of weeks to try to keep learning going as best we can through a very difficult time where people didn't know anything about COVID other than it may have been the boogeyman. I mean, it was this unknown. So then in 2021 was our most heavily impacted year, all right? A lot of COVID measures in place, a lot of digital learning, virtual learning. We had that. Then 21, 22, things got back to normal, okay? That it was, we still had the first semester, though, of 21, 22 that I think we had masks in place and, still had some issues where we had to, I think we had a week in January where we had to shut down for a week. So 21, 22 wasn't without its issues. So we've looked at this. There's certain grade levels, and you'll hear from our supervisors in just a minute, There'll be certain grade levels where we'll see some data points that we can make some direct correlations here. For instance, in ninth grade, if a student had math second semester, they basically had half a year of math, and now they're a senior in high school, okay? Now, we put things in place. We put math labs in place. We added additional teachers there. We did things to try to offset that lost instruction after that 1920 school year. But there's just certain things that's hard to make up, all right? There's other grade levels. We look at our current third graders. They were significantly impacted in K and 1. Super foundational year for learning how to read, okay? So, those are just things that we need to be mindful of moving forward and knowing what our kids are facing and as we move throughout the years up until the 32-33 school year, all right? We'll be here for graduation, right? Okay? Hopefully, okay? So with that said, we're going to start in our high schools, work our way through our elementary and then into our federal programs. Jennifer Fanning, our high school specialist, she's going to come share that data with you.
All right, so I'm just going to take a few minutes just to kind of go over the high school data. And so we'll start with our graduation rate in CCR, which is our college and career readiness indicator. As you can see, we were pretty consistent with our graduation rate until last year, where that dropped at 2%. And we do have to remember that those were our 10th graders that lost that 9 week of learning. Their 11th grade year was in-person learning as well as remote learning back and forth. Y'all remember how crazy that was. And then their senior year, they were still really affected by that COVID. So we did see a higher dropout rate for those students. We just believe it was kind of some of the inconsistencies that we saw with our world. College and career readiness, remember this is our benchmark for Alabama students that show us that they're ready either for work or for continued education. And I'm going to get into that a little bit deeper in just a minute. But as you can see, we had like a huge jump from last year, from 2021 to 21-22, a 10% jump there. And so our schools are really focusing on trying to get our students those indicators because the state is saying, if those students have one of those indicators, which we'll get in further, they're more likely to be successful. And so we are seeing gains in that, and we are seeing our schools really focus on making sure that our students get that CCR. Speaking of college and career readiness, there are different ways that a student can get a college and career readiness. One is by benchmarking on the ACT, and I have listed those down there, which the ACT has deemed if a student gets that, when they take the ACT, that they're more likely to be successful in their first year of college. Advanced placement, that's our AP program. That's them getting a qualifying score, so a 3 or higher. Work keys, there are 3 different areas, and they have to get a silver in each one of these areas. That's applied mathematics, graphic literacy, and workplace document. And a silver shows that they are, according to ACT, that the students are foundational, they have those foundational skills in about 71% of those jobs in the ACT database. Dual enrollment, that's taking a dual enrollment course and getting a passing score through like Calhoun, Drake, in classes like that. CTE credential, those are awarded and earned by completing a course of study that's career technical education, and then they're passing some type of assessment saying that they have passed that and they're ready to move on. Military, of course, that's joining the military. CTE completer, that is new. Last year, they implemented that this summer, I believe, and that's where a student is completing 3 courses of a CTE and making a 70 or better in that course. So that was recently added, and that's really helped. Now, I know that we look at that ACT data and we're kind of like, wow, like that really jumped or fell. And we do have to remember those were the 10th graders, and they've had lots of gaps in their learning. But if you look at the work keys in the CTE credentialing, those have improved by 9% in both areas, so that's 18%. So as a system, we're just not focusing on the ACT anymore. We're focusing on that whole child and those students that aren't necessarily going to go to college. So we're really providing some of those areas for work after high school with those work keys and with that CTE credentialing. But as you can see, we've really just kind of increased in different areas, and with each school having what's called built-in flex time. That's 30 to 45 minutes every single day built into every single one of our high schools now, which is amazing, where we can kind of really hone in on and focus on these to ensure that our students are getting one of these before they graduate so that they're ready. Advanced placement results. As you can see, the total exams and total number of students have kind of fluctuated through the years. The bold years are kind of our re-engagement. That's when A+ College Board works with our system. They provide financial funding for teachers, for exams, incentives, and things like that. So you can kind of see that those were the years. We're not in that engagement anymore. But what I'm proud of is looking kind of at the past 3 years, those qualifying scores, which is the percentage of students who earned, who scored a 3 or higher, has continued to increase. The equity every single year for the past 3 years, regardless of COVID, has increased, and that's the percentage of seniors who scored a 3 or higher on an exam at any time. And then the total AP scholars, regardless of COVID, like those students that are doing it, they're like AP scholars. They're getting qualifying scores on 3 or more of their exams. So while our numbers kind of fluctuate, we're continuing to grow those students that are in that program with their qualifying scores, and getting them, and when they get a qualifying score, they don't have to take that course in college. That's their college course, and it goes over to that. So we're really proud of that. ACT with writing, even though I know on CCR that number dropped to 44%, but as you can see, we're still increasing. All of our scores increased this year. Not hugely, but I think that it shows that the things that we have in place are starting to work. We're really starting to hone in on the ACT with that flex time. I know that Hazel Green has bought a program called CERT, and so they're really kind of being intentional on where students are and what support that they need, as well as each school's using their pre-ACT data that they just took in October. So we have those results back. So our schools are being very intentional with that pre-ACT data. So during that flex time, like if a student is struggling in one area, the teachers assign them to a teacher that is really good at that. And so we have those things in place to continue to grow our students and support them on that ACT. We just kind of also wanted to show you the attendance. The blue fall 2021 is November 1st, and then the 2022 is also November 1st. And so the exam exemption policy is working. We are seeing more students show up. We feel like these numbers would have been a little bit better if October wasn't such a hard year with the flu. We know how bad that was, and so we had another dip. But as you can see, all of our schools' attendance has increased from last year with this exam exemption. Hazel Green High School, almost 2.5%. Madison County High, 1%. New Hope, almost 2%. Sparkman, 2.5%. And so we're seeing that exam exemption is working, and our students are showing up. We also just wanted to take a few minutes to highlight our Career Tech Center. It's here on our campus, and I think too many times we forget to celebrate all of the great things that they're doing there. As you can see, over the past couple of years, the enrollment has continued to increase. We're up 45 students this year, and so that is continuing to increase every year because we want to make sure that the students that want to get into that program and those programs are having that capability to do that. Again, our programs are growing. One thing that I thought was awesome is our CTE credentialing. I mean, that jumped 9% last year, so that's huge. Those students are walking away with a credential in welding and things like that, and being able to go out in the job force and make some really, really good money right out of high school. So we are super proud of that. Work-based learning, this is where students, usually in their junior, senior year, they're able to do some work-based learning from the things that they've done previously from the Career Tech Center, and it's work-based. And as you can see, the work-based learning earnings are significant. You know, Mr. Solly brought this up to me, and I had no idea about this myself. But, you know, in 2020-21, they still made almost $1.5 million. 21-22, over $1 million. And right now, like this was just November 1st, that's our earnings right now, over $500,000. So like that's just significant. This is our students. This is what our students are making. And so I'm really excited to see at the end of the year what they've done. And Mr. Romine said that this year is anticipated to be significantly higher due to the wage increases that our local employers are paying to try to get employees to come to work. High school structures. These are just some of the things that over the past 3 years have been put in place to try to support some of these gaps in learning. Like I mentioned earlier, all of our high schools have built-in flex time. Like, this is huge. I'm just so excited about this. And that's used for intervention when a student needs help on something, extension when the student knows it, and we're pushing them along and letting them kind of just continue to grow. This also is a time for us to focus on those state exams, as well as that career and college readiness focus, so to ensure that all students are getting a CCR. During this flex time, teachers also have collaborative teacher time. This is the time for teachers to come together at least once a week for 45 minutes to talk about their data, to talk about what they're going to be doing to support their students, and to ensure that all students are learning at high levels. So this is built in and goes along, is at the same time kind of as that flex time in each high school. We have standards-based grading, and that's kind of just, we're focusing on geometry for that, and we've got a group of teachers from each high school that are representative for their school, and as a district, they're working on pulling out the essential standards for the district, and then next they'll be working on proficiency scales, and then eventually we want to do some district level, maybe formative assessments. Again, so across the system, no matter what high school that a student is at, that they're getting that same rigor, and we're ensuring that all of our students across the system have that high learning. We also have secondary instructional coaches, and those coaches really work with collaborative teams, They're an assessment data partner, and they support our new students. Like Mr. Solly was showing you earlier, about 36% of our teachers are new to our system. So they're really working with those new teachers to lay those PLC foundations in the collaborative culture that we are as Madison County. Behavior solutions, that skill versus will, which is a huge thing right now for our students, is we know that they have academic, losses, but we also know that we've got to work on that will a little bit, is getting them back to, I want to go to school, I want to do well, I want to be at school. And so all of our secondary schools are going through that. We also have math labs, as Mr. Solly touched on earlier, and that's just an extra support because we know that we've got some huge gaps in our learning for math. AP exams, thankfully, we're able to pay for those again as a system with ESSER funding. So last year we paid for every single AP exam that did not come out of any pocket of a student or a family. We paid for that as a system, and thankfully we're able to do that again this year. And then our summer learning programs, really just focusing on just some classes that some students may need to take again, and then also kind of just to provide some extra learning during the summer for those students that might need that. And then again, like, people without information cannot act, but people with information cannot help but act. We've really been working through this data with our high school principals, setting our own goals. Our assistant principals, we're setting our own goals too, but it's kind of the first year in a while that each school has shared their data and been kind of transparent with it, and it's been amazing just to see the conversations that our leaders, our principals, and our schools are having about, okay, what are you doing here that, your score was this? And so it's really a collaborative culture where our leaders within our schools are kind of all working together to support the needs of all of our students. Any questions?
Hey, Ms. Fanny, not to
Yes.
keep you in the hot seat any longer than you want, but I have a question. And I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball a little bit.
Okay, got it.
Right now, today, is our graduation rate going to trend back up to the 95 or above %?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm seeing so far. Yes. Anything else? And then I'll be back in a few minutes to talk about the academic guide. Tracy?
Good evening. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about our middle grade data. And compared to everything that Jennifer Fanning just talked about, it's a much smaller scale for our middle grades. We only have really 2 data points that we're looking at tonight, and that's going to be our ACAP summative scores and then our STAR scores, which we use for progress monitoring throughout the year. So if we start with our English language arts proficiency, the first slide that you see is a state comparison. And you can see that in all grades, 6, 7, and 8, we are well above the state average. When we compare the achievement of our students to other top-performing systems in the state with similar demographics as ours, you can see that overall, Madison County is outperforming both of those systems. And even if we look at grade 8, we're only about 0.5% behind Shelby County. So again, very competitive with those other systems. If we look at annual growth and we see how our students did from 21 to 22 on the ACAP, we see that we have improvement in every grade for an average of about 4% increase in student proficiency for those grades. We do have a slight dip in our 7th grade data. Historically, that is something that we have seen before, where we have that little dip and then we regain it in 8th grade. And even with that, we were 14% above the state average, even with our 7th grade. This is probably the most promising data that we have tonight, and that is our ACAP growth. So when we get ACAP scores and ACAP reports for our students, not only do they give us a proficiency rate for each student, but they also score the students by categories of growth. From 1 being probably 1 and 2 below average, 3 being average, and 4 being above average. When we look at the bar graph, we can see at a glance that the majority of students in grades 6 through 8 are achieving, they're growing at that highest rate. And again, with the learning loss from COVID, that's the kind of aggressive growth that we need in order to recoup all of that learning. And it hasn't happened in a year. You can see that from our data, but this tells us that we're on the right track and that we have the right things in place to get where we need to be. Now, moving on to math. Mr. Solly mentioned that math got hit the hardest, and that is not just true for our system or our state, that is true for the entire country. And part of that is just it's more difficult to teach math remotely. And then there's some other extenuating circumstances, particularly for this middle grade band. You can see that our 6th graders performed significantly higher than our 7th and 8th. If we go back to that chart that Mr. Solly shared with us about the grades that students missed during remote learning, we can see that our 6th graders missed 4th and 5th. Didn't miss it, but it was compromised from the pandemic with remote learning and hybrid learning, and they just did not have normal school years during those years. So in 4th and 5th grade, that is still basic math. It's advanced, it's beginning 2-digit and 3-digit multiplication and division, and it's decimals, but it's still basic math concepts. When we look at our 7th and 8th graders who both of them missed 6th, one missed 7th as well, that is where the curriculum begins to become more complex. And we get into the foundational learning for algebra and the more advanced math that they will see in high school. So when we see that dip in achievement for those 2 grades, it is a reflection, 1, that math is hard to teach remotely, 2, that the curriculum is a little bit more challenging, and another factor could be the parental support that was available during those remote learning years and hybrid learning years. Whereas a parent might be more equipped to help a 4th and 5th grader with their math, it might not be true for the 6th and 7th graders. And I'll be honest, I think I'm speaking for myself on that one. I think it was around 7th grade that my husband had to start helping our children with their math. So, again, not an excuse, but just to put it in context. And, back to the slide that Jennifer shared, when you have information, you can act. And when you know better, you do better. And this has just shined a flashlight on what we need to focus on. When we compare to those other systems, again, overall, we have the highest achievement based on those 3 systems. And this is an interesting graph because in each system, one of us had an outlier. For us, it was the 6th grade with 47% proficient. That was just a little bit higher than everyone else. For Baldwin County, it was their 7th grade, Baldwin County was their 8th grade, and Shelby County, it was their 7th grade. So again, while we weren't the first in each of those grade levels, because of those outliers, if we look at our overall percentage of proficiency for the 3 grades, then we were. So again, competitive with the top systems in our state with similar demographics. Annual growth, you can see that every grade level showed growth with an average of 7% gain in student proficiency. And the categorical growth for ACAP, again, a high percentage of our students performing at that above average growth. On our science proficiency, when we compare to the state average, again, we're about 10% above the state average for 6th grade and 8th grade. And annual growth, we see that our 6th grade grew 6%, and while our 8th grade did not show growth, they maintained, and they were already performing at a higher level than comparatively the other grades were. And if we compare to other systems, very similar. In this slide, I can only show other system data for 8th grade because while our 4th and 6th graders took it, it only reports in the State Department portal for 8th grade because that's an accountability year, so I'm not able to show you the comparison for 6th grade on this slide. Moving on to STAR, which is the software that we use for progress monitoring. We take it the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. And we see that when we compare beginning of the year, fall of 21 to fall of 22, significant growth in every grade level. And that is for reading and even more so for math. So, I mentioned that the pandemic and the remote learning had a particular effect on our middle grade learners because they're a pretty unique bunch. So we are doing some things to address those unique needs. One of them is the middle grade coaching pilot. There were 4 systems in the state who were chosen to partner with the Alabama Best Practices Center to provide some ongoing professional development for administrators, teachers, and coaches. And this group has been meeting in person and virtually for, I guess, about 6 months now, and it will continue into the spring. And that learning has been targeted and focused on those needs of middle grade learners. Adolescent development emotionally, physically, intellectually, and then talking about the instructional practices that will meet those needs so that the groups that are attending are able to go back and then support the teachers in providing that instruction at their schools. As Jennifer mentioned, we have instructional coaches in middle school and high school now. The coaches get together about once a month, once a quarter roughly, to collaborate, to look at what's going on, to study best practices, and that is our way as a system of making sure that we're maintaining high expectations and that we are just promoting that process of continuous improvement so that our coaches can then go back into the schools and support our teachers. And then also standards-based initiative team. Jennifer mentioned that they are identifying those essential standards for geometry. They are also doing it for 7th grade. So we have teachers from around the system who are collaborating to go through, dig deep into the standards, and not only identify what's essential, but break those standards apart so that you know each individual learning target, what it takes combined to master that standard, and then also what prerequisite skills and knowledge are needed. So when we do that, when we pick out what's essential and then we really break it down, what we're doing is we're giving teachers the tools to focus in on the highest leverage instruction that will move our students. So when we look at that dip in 7th grade, we are doing things to address that. And I think that that will make a big difference moving forward. And before I turn it over to Haley with our elementary data, do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to share with you first our reading data, and what I did is put together information that puts our M class, which measures our early reading skills starting in kindergarten, and comparative with ACAP data. And in each column, it's like the current 3rd graders, current 4th graders, current 5th graders, and then what that data looked like at each grade level. As you can see, sometimes it says Dibbles and sometimes it says M class. And I do want to point out that those are 2 different versions of a similar test. And as it changed from Dibbles to M class, the benchmarks also changed. And along with the benchmarks, we assess at a deeper level at the upper grades. So for example, in 2nd and 3rd grade with Dibbles, students may have only been assessed on how many words that they could fluently read in a minute's time, whereas now they have multiple assessments that breaks down nonsense words by correct letter sound, so it does letter sound fluency, whole words read, sight word reading, also the fluency of words per minute, as well as the percentage of accuracy. And so while the data is comparative in nature, there are some differences in the type of assessment that was given. So for our current 3rd graders, the yellow indicates when COVID required us to go home. And so we only had mid-year data at that point, and that was taken around Christmas time. So our current 3rd graders were about 77% proficient in kindergarten that year in Dibbles. They ended the year of 1st grade 74% proficient in M class, which is not bad considering they missed a large portion of the last part of kindergarten. As 2nd graders, they ended the year at 75% proficient in M class and 69% proficient in on ACAP reading. For 4th graders, they had a full year of kindergarten, 85% proficient on Dibbles. As 1st graders, that data reflects mid-year, so around the winter break, 70% proficient. And then as 2nd graders, and this was also the very first year that our 2nd grade has ever taken a state assessment, the ACAP, but 73% proficient on M class and 62% proficient on ACAP reading. But then that went back up as far as the ACAP. The M class maintained at 73%, but the ACAP score went up to 78%. And then our current 5th graders, they had a full year of kindergarten in 1st grade, 86%. There was a dip in 1st grade to 75%. At 2nd grade was the year that was affected by COVID, so 77% M class mid-year. And then they ended 3rd grade year at 69% proficient on M class and 65% proficient on reading. Also 1st year to take ACAP. And then the next year is 4th graders that spiked back up to 78% proficient on reading. So this is a breakdown of the 2 years of M-Class that were given 2020-21. That was the first year that we gave the full assessment. And then this past year, 21-22. This breaks it down into growth levels. So the first set of bars that you see, those are well below average growth. So the first year that we gave it, 14% of our students fell into that category, decreased that category to 8% the next year. So if you'll notice the middle bars and over, that's average growth and higher, all the way up to well above average growth. And as you can see, we had a good percentage of students that fell into that the very first year, making growth through that year. But the next year, we increased that even more and decreased the number of students who fell into those lower 2 growth categories. And then this breaks it down by subtest. So each one of these subtests represents something that is assessed on the M-Class assessment. A couple of them are kindergarten only, some of them are kindergarten and first grade only, and then some of them are tested all the way through. But as you can see, from 2020 to 21 and then 21 to 22, we have made growth in every one of those subtest data points. And all of these also align directly with the Alabama Literacy Act requirements of what should be taught in the classrooms for the science of reading. So for our math data, prior to 2020-21, we did not have a consistent progress monitoring for math. So iReady is now what we use, and it has been a great program and has also provided us a pretty clear picture of what ACAP is going to, it's a good predictor of ACAP. So our current third graders, they had 49% proficient. That was the first year that they took it, so that was the 2021 school year. And then this past school year ended with 58% proficient in iReady and 60% proficient in math on the ACAP. Our current fourth graders took iReady and ACAP for the first time as second graders. And like I said, that was also the first year that second grade has ever taken a state assessment. 46% proficient in iReady and 42% proficient on ACAP math. But the next year as third graders, you can see there was a significant increase to 58% proficient on iReady and 54% proficient on ACAP. And then our current fifth graders who took iReady and ACAP for the first time as third graders, 45% proficient and 31% on ACAP math. Also significant gains of 48% proficient on iReady and 41% proficient on ACAP math. So this chart is strictly iReady growth, and there are 2 types of growth categories for iReady. There is a typical growth scale, and then there's a stretch growth scale. So typical growth would indicate a year's worth of growth. Stretch growth indicates more than a year's worth of growth. And so if we are thinking about intervention type plans for students who are strugglers, we typically look at that stretch growth, because in order to close gaps, we want to make sure that that child is making more than just typical growth for that year. And so as you can see, the light blue represents 2021 school year, and the darker blue represents last school year, 21-22, and we significantly had more students who fell in that stretch growth than the previous year, meaning that we're closing those gaps in math, which is very important to our middle school and high school math scores that we've discussed. And then also our teachers are understanding the importance of that goal setting and helping students set those stretch goals, and also understanding how to use iReady to help monitor progress for students who have intervention plans. And then if you look at our subcategories of the test, iReady breaks the test into number and operation, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and also geometry. And in each one of those categories had made growth from the previous year. And then this represents our ACAP growth for both ELA and math. And these are students who scored at levels 3 and 4. So the lighter blue represents ELA, and the darker blue represents math. And these are levels 3 and 4 of growth. Let let me point one other thing out here. So back to the math and closing that gap, it shows here that we are making significant growth gains in math, which is very important to closing that gap because right now our math scores are lagging behind our ELA. Are there any questions?
Nikki doesn't want me to talk. She took it down. No, kidding. I asked her to update something. You may need a stretch break before we get started. This is a long meeting. Tonight I'm going to talk to you guys about our most at-risk populations of students. And, excuse me, I've had a cold. I have the pleasure of working with 11 schools as the Title I, person. And a lot of times in federal programs, you may think about students who fall into those categories of disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and also students who may have a harder time making growth and progress. But I think the data that I'm going to be able to show you tonight is going to show that these funds that we spend are meeting the needs of our schools, and the achievement of these students is not impaired by adverse circumstances. And so in Title I, this is FY23's allocation, which is the year that we're in now that started October 1. Our allocation was $3.1 million. And of that allocation, I just wanted to point out when we look at the data, because I do think that this is significant to understand, every district does not always put their money into instruction and personnel. And we've made a commitment to that in our Title I schools, and we've made a commitment to that with our ESSER funds. And I'm really proud of the data that I'm going to present to you tonight, but a lot of it is because we focus how we spend those funds. And this chart just sort of shows you in program expenses, more than 50% is directly for instruction, falls into that instruction category. We also spend a significant amount in in preschool programs as well. Now, inside those expense categories, 82% of that funding is spent on personnel. And this is personnel inside our Title I schools. And the goal of spending on people and not products is that we want to implement the system strategic plan in the Title I schools at the highest level possible. And by providing personnel that is experienced and expertise in the areas of coaching and instructional support, we're able to maximize all of the district initiatives. So a lot of the support personnel that we have is working directly in that professional learning community capacity in coaching and instructional support, but they're also working with children in academic intervention and extension. So a couple of things I just want to highlight because the ladies have done a great job of sharing with you all the information of the data as far as overall achievement. But what I wanted to point out to you is the achievement of the Title I schools specifically. And so if you look at 2021, this is ACAP math proficiency for all students. And you can see that the blue column is Title I schools. So even during the pandemic, our Title I schools outperformed the schools in the state of Alabama. And that's not just Title I schools in the state of Alabama, that's all schools in the state of Alabama. And then when you look at 2022, I want you to notice that growth, because look how far those Title I schools grew. And we're competitively growing with the overall of the district. And that's because those funds that we're spending are making sure that there's not a gap in achievement between the Title I schools and the non-title schools. And we can feel very confident that our Title I schools are performing better than all schools in the state of Alabama. That's not a comparison of Title I school data. That's a comparison of all school data with our Title I schools. When we look at this slide, I wanted to point out that this is data specific to that subgroup of economically disadvantaged children. And when we talk about economically disadvantaged children, those are children who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Now, on the slide that Mr. Solly showed you, that demographic is growing. We have the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch that I think has been recorded in Madison County ever. And so you might think that that might cause a gap. But what I want you to notice is that the economically disadvantaged children in our Title I schools not only grew, but they grew at an extraordinarily high level. And that our economically disadvantaged children are outperforming the state of Alabama almost double. And I think that that's a significant data point. And this is math. And we've talked about tonight that math was the most adversely affected. But I think what we can feel good about is that where we're putting our funds is working for those students. And I think that we can also say with a lot of certainty that those kids in our Title I schools are not disproportionately affected by adverse circumstances. So our ELA achievement data, I just have to again point out that our Title I schools are significantly outperforming all the schools in the state of Alabama. And I'm proud of that because that's hard work, and that speaks to the dedication of the administrators in the Title I schools. And we're not doing anything different than the district. Our work is the same as the district work for all schools. It's the work that's tied to the strategic plan, around professional learning communities, around instructional coaching, and around good, solid core instructional programs. And it's resulting in student achievement. And you can see the growth from 2021 to 2022. But this, again, is those disadvantaged students, the poverty students in the Title I schools. And not only are they growing, but they're significantly achieving higher than the schools in the rest of the state. And I think that that is something that we should celebrate. And I think that that is work that, you know, the dedication and the focus on just a few things that make instruction better, professional learning community work, the work that we are doing with our instructional coaches, and the tiered intervention and instruction programs that are in place, where students who are not mastering a standard have Tier 2 intervention, and then when they don't get it then, they go into Tier 3, which provides them with significant support to close those gaps. Another thing I just want to highlight, we have only one Title I high school, and that's New Hope High School. And I just want to point out something that they're doing, and they're really focusing. So one of the people that they pay for out of Title I funds is an instructional coach in their school. And probably 2 years ago, I met with their team, and I said, you know, I want New Hope High School to be the first high school in Madison County to have a 100% CCR rate. And they looked at me and kind of said, okay. And so we put some efforts there, and their instructional coach has really targeted the students who don't meet those. They know those kids by name. They know who those kids are, and they're intervening with those kids. And so I just want to point out that their CCR went from 86% last year to 94% this year, with a 95% graduation rate. And that's what we want to see in all of our high schools. But we're doing it in our highest poverty high school right now. And I'm really proud of the work that they've done, the dedication that they've had to that, the commitment that they have. But it's also significant that when you are able to put funding into personnel, you are able to provide the supports that students need to make growth. And I think that that's just significantly shown in the data of our Title I schools. So English learners also fall under federal programs. And I think that you guys saw on Mr. Solly's data the growth, but this chart just sort of puts it into perspective. This is my 6th year in this position. And when I started in this position, we had under 200 students. And today, that's not even accurate because we've gained 10 kids since I did this slide. So we're at 517 students as of today. And these are students who qualify for services. This is not touching the number of students that we have in our district who speak a language other than English. These are the students who speak a language other than English but are not yet proficient in the English language. And so these students receive some supplemental services from our ESL teachers. So in 2022, we tested 425 students, and 44% of them met their growth targets. This is on the access assessment. This assesses only English language proficiency, speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Now, only 7% of our students exited last year, which is lower than what we want. But 26% of the students, 110 of them, scored a 4.0 or higher. To exit the program, they need a 4.8 in every area as a composite. And so our goal is to get those kids across that threshold next year. But we know who those students are. We're providing intervention for them, and they're making significant progress. One thing I just want to point out, because we talk about federal money and we talk about supplemental funds. With Title III, there are some very specific things that you can spend supplemental funds on, and one of them is tutors. We get a very small amount of money for Title III. This year is $43,000. And with that money, we are providing some Title III tutors. And those are for our newcomers who are brand new to this country and don't speak any English. But they're also our ELs who are identified as level 1 or 2 on the access assessment. In all of these schools, we had a significant percentage of students meet their growth target. Because, we take that and it becomes the district data, but these are some specific schools I want to highlight. The ones that are in yellow have Title III tutors. And so what we know is the more that we can provide that personnel to provide that intensive instruction that they need, the more progress the students can make.
Carrie?
Yes.
The Hazel Green, is there a reason why they didn't have the tutor?
So the reason that we place the tutor is depending on size of population and percentage of time that their EL teacher can be there. And the teacher that serves Hazel Green only serves one other school. So she's able to be there a significant amount of time. But several of our schools have one teacher that's serving 7 schools. And so it makes it very hard for that person to get the amount of time. And so in those schools where the teacher is unavailable as frequently, we have those tutors placed there. So another highlight that I just want to point out for our EL data, this is ELA data on ACAP. And I know that these proficiencies look low, but remember, keep in your mind, these are the kids who are not proficient in English. And so expecting them to be proficient in ACAP is maybe a pretty high expectation because they're still learning how to read and speak and write in English. But in 2021, 19% of our students were benchmarking on ACAP. And this year in 2022, 22% of our students benchmarked on ACAP. But I just want to point out how significantly more that is than the number of EL students who benchmark in the state. And for ACAP math, last year we were below the state. But I just want you to notice, not only did we make tremendous gains, but now we're 5% above the state. And so, yes, COVID has adversely affected some of our populations of students, but the work that our teachers are doing, the supplemental fund usage that we provide is definitely showing an increase. And remember, the number of these students is also growing. So to show growth when your population is also growing is harder, and I'm very proud of the work that they are doing. So that is all the data that I have, but I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer Fanning, and I appreciate your time. I didn't ask if anybody has any questions.
I had one question. So are any schools on the brink of becoming Title I?
Our Title I data is changing, and we do have some significant changes in the poverty percentages in our schools. The thing with whether we add schools is a conversation that we have to have, because the federal law requires us that our highest poverty schools and smallest schools have to have what they call a viable program. And in their minds, a viable program must exceed $100,000. And so we have some very small Title I schools. So the more you add schools to the number of schools served, the more you divide the money between those schools. And so the law requires you to serve any schools that have 75% or greater poverty. We don't have any that have 75% or greater. We do have some that are getting close to 65, 69%. However, we currently serve all schools that are greater than 40% poverty. Now, with the changes, and you guys saw we're up to 44%, and we were 36% maybe a year ago. Well, before we stopped taking free lunch applications, I just have to point that out, because some of that dipped during COVID because all children ate free and parents didn't fill those forms out. But this year, when we look at our rank order, there are some significant shifts where there are some areas that have really increased the rate of students who receive free and reduced lunch, and other schools that have historically been on our list of schools served have dropped. And so it will be a conversation that we will have to have as we move forward into the second semester, where we look at which schools will be served next year, because we just can't serve all of them and have viable programs in our smallest schools that have higher poverty. And so we may want to adjust the percentage that we serve to 45, or we may want to look at some grade span serving where we focus on our elementary schools. There are a lot of options that we have, but the law will tell us, there are certain things that we can't do. So we have to serve our elementary students. We have to serve in rank order, which means highest poverty schools get the most. And Madison Crossroads is a huge school, and their poverty rate continues to grow. And so they get a significant amount of funding. If we added another school that has 1,000 kids in it, we would not be able to have viable programs in some of our smaller schools like Owens Crossroads, Madison County Elementary, and Walnut Grove. And so we're going to have to look at how to balance that out. I don't think that adding more schools is the solution, but maybe shifting the schools that we currently serve will be the solution that we have to look at. So, but times are changing, demographics in the system are changing, and we know that housing is getting less and less affordable in some of our areas, which is causing an increase of our low-income families to go to some other areas, and so it definitely has shifted, but I can share that information with you. I have it.
I think it'll be interesting, too, to see the shift in my district when we do the zone line changes. I mean, the zone line changes aren't significant, but it'll be interesting to see how that poverty level shifts, particularly up north in the Madison Crossroads area.
And that is going to be something that's important for me to get a list of those students so that I can accurately project what those numbers look like, because when we reconfigured, like in New Hope, we have to count the reconfiguration students as our data point as opposed to the students in the 20-day count. So I'll have to combine them with the numbers and make those shifts. So as soon as that decision is made, that is information that I will need so that I can help to plan what that looks like for our Title I services.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you, Ms. Carey.
Thank you.
All right, I know that y'all sat through a lot of information, so I'll try to make this as painless as I can. We're just going to go over just some few changes and updates that we're going to make to our high school academic guide. And I will send this presentation out to you afterwards if you'll click on the actual academic guide, it will give you a live link to the document so you can see all the highlighted portions of what we're amending. On page 10, we're adding the early graduate requirements. These are nothing new, but right now in our academic guide, it does not have certain things that students have to have done before they graduate, like the FAFSA, the civics exam, and a CCR. And I'm going to go into depth into those requirements with you and kind of talk through those once we kind of get through this so that you understand those graduation requirements. On page 11, we removed the specific visa for our students that are coming in from out of the United States that are wanting to go into our schools. It was an F1, but now we accept various visas. We know that that's changed, and so that F1 visa was just kind of outdated. And so we've taken that out and haven't put a specific visa in there. And when I researched it, there wasn't a visa that most schools don't accept. So we just took that out because it said F1 and that's outdated. On page 13 and 14, again, we added in graduation requirements and definitions. These aren't new, but they weren't in the academic guide, and we want to make sure that our students and parents understand that there are certain things that they must complete before graduating. On page 22, we added a new AP course. That's AP Pre-Calculus. It's a new course that the College Board is implementing next year. On page 26, that was the new AP course information. That's for that AP Pre-Cal class. That just kind of gives the explains the course and kind of the prerequisites that the students need to be able to take that. On page 56, we amended on the driver's education. We added that a driver's permit is required, but it can't have principal permission if they don't have one. We've noticed that in some of our larger schools, students are getting into that course and they don't have that permit, and they really can't, the driver's ed teacher can't really drive with them. They can do it in the parking lot and drive them in the parking lot and things like that. But there's just been some kind of back and forth with some schools struggling with students not having that permit and not working towards getting that permit. And so we added in that is a requirement, but of course, if it's a special circumstance, the principal can say that they can take that course. This is our career technical education updates. Mr. Romine has updated these, and so I'll go over these quickly. On page 82, at Hazel Green High School, Informational Technology Fundamentals is being added under Computer Science. Interior Design at Hazel Green High School is being added under Human Services. On page 95, we're removing Architecture and Construction Program at Madison County Career Tech Center. This program will no longer be at Madison County Career Tech. That was actually an adjunct teacher, and they are retiring, and we cannot replace that. And so that program will be going away from the Career Technical Center. But the good thing is that we're adding another program at the Career Tech Center, Informational Programming Software Development / Cybersecurity. This is a brand new program that Madison County Career Tech is moving towards, and we know that that's where our world is really moving to, and that's on page 97. On page 99, we added new course of study for automobile collision repair. And again, these are just some small changes to keep up with the ever-changing work industry and making sure that our students are prepared for those. And on page 100, we moved modern manufacturing from dual enrollment at Calhoun Community College. That was through them. Now that is going to be directly through Madison County Career Tech Center. That will no longer be in a dual enrollment class. Any questions about any of those changes? So I just wanted to briefly go over the graduation requirements and be able to ask any questions. So in 21-22, the academic school year, the state put in legislation requiring that all high school seniors complete the free applications for federal student aid, that's called the FAFSA, before graduating from high school. The reason that they put this in place is that students completing this kind of showed the highest rate of students actually going to a secondary college because they didn't realize all of the resources and financial aids that they had available to them. And so the state felt like if every senior was doing this and every student kind of knew their opportunity for some type of secondary education after high school. Now, this can be waived. As a parent can opt out of this. If they do not want to fill this out, they have to fill out a form that goes to the school where the principal, the counselor, and then the superintendent have to all sign that. But there is an opt-out option for that.
Just to point a note, I don't think that was a legislative thing. That was a policy that was put in place by the State Board of Education. It was not a legislative
Okay.
act at all. That was just a policy that they put in place.
Okay, I'll make sure to update that in that. The next one is the Alabama Civics exam, and that requires that each Alabama high school student complete a civics test composed of 100 questions as a graduation requirement. These are test questions derived from the citizenship and immigration services that we use for that civics test. And this took effect in the 18-19 school year. Again, these are nothing new, but they weren't addressed in the academic guide, and we really want to make sure that our students understand kind of these requirements. Any questions on either one of those?
2018, I thought you meant 18.
And then lastly, we talked briefly about this in our data, but today, the state board passed that starting in the graduating class 26-27, so our upcoming freshmen, they are required to have a CCR in order to graduate. And so that was voted on today. I think Mr. Solly told me it was 5-2. And so starting next school year with our ninth graders, they will be required to have a CCR in order to graduate. And so, like I said, we've talked through a lot of this, but again, it's just a benchmark for students in the state of Alabama that shows that they're ready for work or for further education. They can do this by getting a benchmark on at least one subject area test on the ACT. They can do this by getting a benchmark on all the subject areas of work keys, and that's a silver. And again, that's where students know at least 71% of the skills based on ACT's database. An AP qualifying score, college credit, dual enrollment, military enlistment, career and technical education credentialing, and then also, which is one that is new for last year, was the program completer. Are there any questions on those? Again, just some highlights of advanced placement courses. We have over 22 courses that we offer. Dual enrollment, we work with 7 different providers to provide this dual enrollment in these college classes. We have 114 arts courses that we offer to our high school students, which I think is phenomenal that we're focusing on arts. And then our career tech, we're aligned to the workforce needs, and I just kind of wanted to show all of the different things that not only do we offer at the Career Tech Center, but these programs are also in our high schools. And so just kind of highlighting some of the great things that we have going on. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Code of conduct update?
Good evening, everyone. While she's getting that up, I'll go ahead and get started because I know this has been a long night. So just real quickly, the Code of Conduct, just need a proposed language change. And the language is just due to the state at adding an additional SIR codes, which stands for Student Incident Report Codes, to the Power School So these items were already addressed as a violation in our Code of Conduct. So everything's already in there as far as the violations and the consequences. We just didn't have specific codes for e-cigarettes and vaping. And the state has created those codes, so we're just asking to add those. Again, it does not change the consequence, does not change definitions or anything. It's just additional codes that help us better understand. We used to code everything under tobacco, if it was an e-cigarette or a vape, unless the vape contains an illegal substance, it was coded under tobacco. And so now, with those specific categories, it just helps us better look at our data. And again, it's something that the state added into Power School. So my proposed change is just a change to the title of that section in the Code of Conduct. It was just tobacco, but I'm asking to change that to vapes and e-cigarettes so that that's understood at the top. And then just down at the bottom, just those specific codes added to the grid. So are there any questions about those changes? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sweat. So we are about to go into regular session. Okay. Any additional questions, comments about what was discussed, informational items? I don't have my gavel, so I'm gonna use my hand. Madison County Special Session for November 10th, 2022 is in session. We're going to go ahead, before we begin, I want to recognize two individuals that are here. Board Member-elect Bill Byrd for District 5 and Board Member-elect Heath Jones for District 4. Welcome, and I'm glad you're here. Congratulations on your election, and we look forward to serving with you at the next board meeting. So thank you for being here. All right, Ms. Perkins. Right.
I recommend approval of the agenda dated Thursday, November 10th, 2022.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for the approval of agenda dated November 10th, 2022. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I recommend approval of the minutes dated September the 6th, 13th, and October the 13th and 25th, 2022.
Motion?
Second.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of minutes dated September 6th and 13th, October 13th and 25th, 2022. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize Mr. Weiss and Ms. Rucker. We appreciate all the work that you all have done for our district, the tireless hours that you put in, all the myriads of emails and phone calls that you all receive. Thank you for all that you've done. We appreciate you. And on behalf of the Madison County Board of Education and Madison County as a whole, we want to present you with 2 plaques to recognize and to thank you for all your service to our district. So, let's see.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Ms. Rucker?
I'll let you go first.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Wise? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Once again, we're blessed to have you all serve on our board. You guys have been phenomenal. We've had an outstanding board. The communication between us, the respectfulness, all the things that the state even recognizes as a model board, you guys have embodied that. So thank you very much for your service. We appreciate you. I will miss both of you, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the street sometime. I'll see you out there.
Administrative item? Oh, yeah, go
One
ahead.
more second. I will say this. We did have a resolution. Mr. Brooks is not here, so he won't be able to sign it, but I'm going to go ahead and read this resolution. We'll read it again at the next board meeting, so we'll make sure we get this signed. But just so you all, I'm going to read this so it's in the minutes tonight. We have, whereas Dave Weiss and Sherry Rucker were elected to serve as members of the Madison County Board of Education in 2016, and whereas Mr. Weiss and Ms. Rucker have served the students, teachers, and administrators of the Madison County school system for 6 years, and whereas Ms. Weiss and Ms. Rucker's term of service as members of the Madison County Board of Education will end in November of 2022 upon the election of their successors, and whereas the below signed members of the Madison County Board of Education wish to recognize the service, dedication, and achievements of Mr. Weiss and Ms. Rucker during their tenure on the Madison County Board of Education. And now therefore be it resolved that the below signed members of the Madison County Board of Education, in appreciation for their years of dedicated service, direct the superintendent and his staff to issue lifetime athletic passes to events and other school activities to Mr. Weiss and Ms. Rucker effective November 18, 2022. These passes are issued in a recognition of the commitment and service to the Madison County School System and in hopes that they will continue to attend and support the athletic endeavors of Madison County Schools. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution will be presented to Dave Weiss and Sherry Rucker, and that this resolution be set in perpetuity upon the minutes of the Madison County Board of Education. Date the 10th day of November 2022.
Thank you.
Go to a ball game. Yeah, I'll see you at a ball game.
Thank you, Nick.
Well,
Thank
with
you.
that, you can go to all the ball games. Administrative items. Item A, I recommend approval of the fiscal year end 2022 fiscal statements and payments of bills as submitted.
Motion.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of fiscal year end 2022 financial statement and payment of bills as submitted. Any discussion? I see Ms. O'Bannon is ready to give us a little bit of time to
Great.
discuss.
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
At the end of the fiscal year, I usually present just a few slides to summarize. I promise you, there's not as many as we have in a budget hearing. So I'll go through those quickly. But before I do, I want to personally thank Mr. Weiss and Ms. Rucker for all their service in the last 6 years, and for supporting me as the Chief School Financial Officer, supporting the business operations, for keeping me on my toes, and for helping me and my team and the district team to think outside the box. And I just thank you for your professionalism in everything that you did and how you worked with me, and just a personal thank you from me. I appreciate you, and I'll miss you.
Well, Karen, you are, I'll let Sherry speak if she wants, but you are a huge asset to this system. You and your staff just a tremendous amount of work. It is daunting to come in here and see all the financial stuff if you're not used to it. And I say that for Mr. Byrd and Mr. Jones's benefit. It is truly daunting when you're suddenly giving this documentation and you're looking at it, and you always took the time to share your knowledge and your information with me, and I know with Ms. Rucker and others on the board as well, to help make sure we fully understood what it is that we were seeing and voting on and discussing, because it is it is quite eye-opening, and it is daunting to see the budget and all the monies and everything that goes on in this district. So thank you to your staff and to you for everything that you do for this system. You do a great job of keeping this system running and doing well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's your night, and I wanted just to let you know how much you've impacted our group and our finance team.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So I just have a few slides. You've, to summarize the financial health of the district at the closing of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. So, school systems across the state have more funds, than they've had. I mean, I started in 2004, so over the 18 years, we have more funds right now, and we've talked a little bit about it. The main reason is in consecutive years, we have received supplemental funds from ESSER due to COVID. We've received over $30 million, and that's freed up a lot of our local funds in certain areas. We've also received our state supplemental funds with their educational technology, advancement technology funds. We've averaged $5 million a year just in that. But so quickly, this balance sheet reflects unreserved fund balance that we're going to talk about in a minute under general operations. I'm going to highlight the $59 million unreserved fund balance. Mr. Solly just mentioned we're at the bottom 27 rating, and you're going to think, oh my gosh, that can't be. But this is unprecedented. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But just for the balance sheet, I want to just share with you the highlighted $423 million. That represents our capital assets and our fixed assets for the school system. Our buildings, our everything, all the assets, personal property as well. And then the $153 million, this is the only place this is reported. That's why I highlighted those two. The long-term debt outstanding of our warrants, bonds, financing arrangements is $153 million. So we'll go on to what the private sector calls the income statement. the combined statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And so all fund types are shown here, but I want to focus on the summary report with you that you're accustomed to seeing every month for general operations. So here, the new board members will see that I provide this monthly, but at fiscal year end, it's most important because it's year to date. Our variances, if you'll look at general fund, our general operations, the budget to actual percentages, you can see it's clearly favorable with revenues over 100%. I'll show you why that in a minute. That's our local revenues that are coming in higher, significantly higher than expected. And expenditures are less than budgeted right now, but obviously our target is 100%. But these are both favorable variances, and even on the special revenue side, that is where we report our federal programs, our federal funds. We've received more than budgeted in federal revenues, and so we've spended more at the same, not quite the same percentage, but close to that, for the stipulations that are set out in those federal programs, whether it's Title I that Ms. Bass talked about tonight, Title III, ESSER, that's where those are reported. So let's look at the fund equity at the bottom, at the unreserved fund balance of 136, 469. I feel like this is, I hope everybody can hear me. Again, never in my 18 years with the school system has it looked like that. But we must keep in mind that that pendulum will change. It will move in the other direction at some point. But we're going to talk about the best use of our funds and how we can plan for that when I break it down in just a second. But this is the reason, in addition to the supplemental funds we've received from the federal government and supplemental funds from the state, we all know that Huntsville and Madison County is an economic engine right now for the state of Alabama. And so with that, our local revenues are significantly higher, as you can see here. If you look at ad valorem taxes or property taxes for our 16 mills, they're up $3.2 million or 12% overall. I'm sorry, that does not line up properly. I don't know what happens when we put it up on the screen. I need to do a better job with that. Also, in sales taxes, the half cent is up $4.4 million just in this year. When you look at fiscal year 21 compared to fiscal year 22, that's a 30% increase. The 1 cent is up $2.3 million, which is a 17% increase. So overall, local revenues, there's a $10 million difference. And you can see the gradual uptrend there. Even during COVID, we did not, those funds did not decrease during that time period. So here we are, what we just talked about, with unreserved fund balance. I would say, in my opinion, what a school system, obviously, you're required to have a 1-month operating reserve. So ours is averaging right now $15.1 million. Now remember, as you spend more funds in your general operations, your operating reserve, required reserve, also increases. But the required reserve that we have to report to the State Department of Education is $15.1 million at the end of the school year. So we're looking at almost 4 months if you look at the 59. But in that, of course, you deduct out the reserve that's required. Also represented is those ETF, Advancement Technology Funds from the state. We receive the funds in the summer, but we have 16 months to spend them. So those are carried over. Then we have set-aside payments for our Snyder projects in there. In our capital plan, the last that was approved, we've determined, because of the increase in our local revenues, that we can do some things. We can do some capital improvements on a pay-as-you-go basis. In the past, we would scrape up any little half-cent sales tax or whatever and leverage that for principal and interest payments until we maxed out on what we could borrow. Now, in these times that we have, that we need to take advantage of the increase in our surplus, we can do some things and pay as you go, and that's things that have to be determined in the next several months. But we've already talked about some of it, talked about it over the summer, and we'll continue to. So I'm going to show you the next slide, what we have right now in our budget that we talked about at the budget hearing for the $15 million. Now, it depends on rezoning, depends on what else we might do, whether those top three are exact. From New Hope High down, those are projects that Mr. Consort's already planning and going forth with. The other projects are still under discussion with the new administration, the new board, and the executive team. Those discussions will continue. So, with that being said, I'm going to go back to the 37.4 excess that's not budgeted. So when you do pay as you go, we decide whatever we're going to do as far as capital planning. And we'll take those funds and set aside the budget for whatever's in the capital plan and move that over to a capital projects fund. So it's because that is not general operations of the school system. So that will need to be determined. And we still have, these are not in any kind of order, but projected growth right now is at the forefront, and that's what we're most focused on right now. Looking at the capital expansions, whatever we can do to accommodate our students, as well as the IT infrastructure and other things that come with that. Increased utility bills, increased furnishings, and so there's so much that goes along with that when you do renovations, additions, and build new schools. Then our SPED, I talked to you about that in the budget here. I'm not going into that, but the SPED and pre-K mandates are costing us millions of dollars per year. We're growing in that area as well to take care of those students. The state needs to fully fund transportation, so we're still backfilling some gaps there. And other student supports, as Mr. Solly, we've worked with these ESSER funds, and I said we've received over $30 million, and we're able to add these instructional coaches, tutors, summer school, the list goes on and on, as some things Ms. Fanning mentioned. So what can we sustain once those funds are gone? And what will we not be able to afford? So that's something we need to start planning now. School safety, we're setting aside funds for additional SROs in every school as soon as the Sheriff's Department has someone that's eligible and qualifies and ready to go, trained. And then, of course, cost increases and inflations, as you'll see that in just a minute. Let me skip over to the last slide. Other expenditure highlights. Let's keep in mind how inflation continues to hit us hard, as it does across the country, as is across the country. I've just highlighted the major. I cannot believe that's not lining up.
Looks good on the paper.
It looks fine on the paper.
Oh, you have it in front of you?
Yeah.
They don't. I'm trying to impress our new board members. I'm so sorry you don't have a hard copy. I'll give you one. I'm so sorry. That's terrible. Okay. It doesn't usually look like that. Thank you, Mr. Solly. It's too bad now because we're at the last slide. But let's keep in mind inflation. But let's look at what our actual costs were in fiscal year 21, 22, and then the projected for 23. And we already know some of these for 2023 because we received the bills already. But personnel cost, salaries and benefits, represents 83% of our budget. So you can see it was up 3% from 21 to 22, but up 9% is what's projected for this year. That's the raises and the things we worked through this summer. Then SPED personnel cost projected to be up 8% in this fiscal year. Developmental pre-K is another area where we're seeing a lot of growth in with our students coming in. Just from 21 to 22, that was up 30%. 22 to 23, 37% projected. So that's something we also have to look at with the excess reserve. Utilities were up quite a bit from 21 to 22 with rate increases, but that's leveled off. I mean, it was up 7% this year. Garbage and waste is the biggie. In fiscal year 2021, we didn't have as much pickup because of the last 9 weeks of school. But from 21 to 22, 26% increase. And then look at this year. And I've already received the bills. We get the bills monthly, don't we, Mr. Kazort? So we're more than double. And when they increase, when these costs increase, they do not go back down. They, and, unless you change, we can work through some new bid proposals and things of that nature. Building insurance with the state of Alabama has increased 33%, or will. I already have that bill in hand, the $923,000. So you can see what inflation is doing to us as far as building cost, and fuel and transportation went up from 21 to 22. This is no secret to anybody. Doubled, you could say. And then we're still projecting a 14% increase. Not sure about fuel because it fluctuates so much. So instructional support, this is where we still put our money where our mouth is and try to support its personnel and non-personnel cost, projected to go up again this year to $140 million. And this does not include the millions of dollars from ESSER that primarily goes to support instruction and instructional support, some mental health as well. Yes, sir.
Some of these costs are shared, but
That's correct. This is our general operating budget, which does include the state foundation program. Yes, sir. Okay.
Ms. O'Bannon, you probably,
Stammered through all that, and your columns are all messed up.
there's probably a real simple and probably a legal reason why we can't. But is there a reason why we can't use the Madison County, like, Waste Department for garbage? So is there a reason for that, a legal reason why we couldn't partner with another government entity to do that?
I don't think they are set up for that,
Okay,
to use the, you mean the Madison County Commission?
yes,
Not with how we're spread out all over
okay.
the county. We'd love for them to do it for free, but I don't know that they would. I don't think there's staff to cover that, and it's not part of any. Now, bids, like for fuel, we can piggyback off one of their bids.
Okay.
And work with them, like their fuel bid with W.H. Thomas. We've done that in the past. It just has to go before both boards, and both boards agree to do that. But as far as garbage service, no. No, but we do bid it. This was our latest bid was more than doubled. So we will continue to do that.
But the fuel thing would be interesting to see what the difference would be versus, just to check it out, I mean, see what their bid is.
I would like to add, though, that the Madison County Commission, they help us with all of our large debris. We
Gotcha.
call them, they come out and pick that up at no charge.
Okay.
At any of our school locations, here at transportation operations, so we do save some money that way, and they're always eager to help.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
That's right. Okay. Any further discussion for, any questions for Ms. O'Bannon? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I recommend approval of the contracts for services as submitted.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of contracts for services as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I recommend approval of the personnel items as submitted.
Second.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of personnel items as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I recommend approval of the supplemental contracts and discontinued contracts as submitted.
Motion.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of supplemental contracts and discontinuance of contracts as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, this concludes our special session. Is there any other comments, any additional for the good of the board? Anything else? Okay, well, once again, Dave and Sherry, thank you. We certainly do appreciate you. And this is your last formal meeting, so it's going to be weird not seeing you over there. It's going to be weird not texting you or calling you, so.
You can still text and call.
And we will. We will. And we should hopefully call on you guys. And if we have a question or something, maybe you guys can help me out. So,
By all means.
and we look forward to serving with you, Mr. Jones, Mr. Byrd. We look forward to it. All right. We have an executive session, so I need a motion to go into executive session for an expulsion hearing.
Motion. Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are in executive session.
Take a minute or two break.
Executive will use the restroom.
Go ahead. Executive.